My name's Nella, and I want to tell you about something creepy that happened to me. It all started when I was on Facebook browsing through Marketplace. I found an ad for some used toys. I run a daycare, and I'm always looking for new stuff. Things get worn out, and the kids get bored of what we have, so I'm always looking. The seller had a pretty big collection for a low price. There was nothing special, but it was worth it anyway. I messaged the seller, and they replied right away. They seemed friendly and said they were willing to meet up that same day. One strange thing that I noticed was that the profile didn't have a real picture. It was just some black text with a white background. Just some kind of inspirational quote. I don't really remember. The name was also just some random quote as well. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care at the time. The seller suggested that we meet at a Walmart parking lot. Not a problem for me. It was close to my house. One red flag, though, was that they wanted to meet at around 11 p.m. I agreed to do it anyway. I hopped into my car and drove to the Walmart. The parking lot was big, and there were a few cars scattered around. It was well lit, so I felt safe. After I found a spot under a lamppost, I pulled out my phone to check my messages. The seller had told me to meet around back, behind one of the other buildings. The Walmart was in a large plaza with other stores. The seller wanted to meet behind a different one that was across the parking lot. It looked dark over there, and there were no cars. I started my car and followed the directions. When I got there, I had a bad feeling. It was a dark alley with a brick wall on one side. On the other side was a wire fence with overgrown bushes. There was a single light on the building, but it did little to fight the darkness. Just when I was about to leave, a car pulled up in front of me, blocking me from one side. I sat and watched as two men got out. They started walking towards me. I figured they were who I was talking to on Facebook, but they were not carrying a box of toys. One of them was empty-handed. The other was holding what looked like a phone. Not exactly terrifying, but I was creeped out enough that I wanted nothing to do with those guys. The man with the phone looked to have a large beard, but that was all I could tell in the dark. I started reversing my car to get out the other side, but two more men appeared behind me. These two were standing right near the light, so I could see them better. One was tall, about 6'4". The other was about 6 feet tall. They both had short beards and wore baseball hats, making it hard to tell much about their faces. The really scary part is that one of them was holding a crowbar, the other had a gun. As soon as I saw that, I honked my horn 3 times. Then I put the pedal to the metal in reverse. Those guys got a fair warning. My tires screeched as I flew backwards. Thankfully, the men got out of the way. When I was free, I could see the two of them standing there, looking at me. I drove out of that parking lot and headed home. I called the police and reported what happened, but nothing came of it. The profile was gone the next time I checked, and I didn't really get any information on them. Not even a good description of their appearance. No license plate, nothing. The next day, I decided to do a bit of research. I looked up tips for buying things safely on Facebook Marketplace. One of the tips was to meet in a public place, but it also mentioned being cautious if the seller suggests a specific location. That seems odd. Seems pretty obvious, but look who's talking. I walked right into a trap. I may have been naive for going there, but what did they think I was going to do? Just sit in my car and let them rob me? Obviously, I was going to reverse out of there and run them over if I needed to. Criminals are not the smartest among us. If you think you can't get tricked into something like that, then maybe you're right, but that's what I thought before, and I narrowly made it out with my life. These events took place about 7 years ago. It's the reason I deleted most of my social media, even though I had over 10,000 followers at the time. I did my first year of college in the on-campus residences. After that, my roommate Darcy and I got an apartment that was a short bus ride away from the school. It was a newer place in a large apartment building, and it was near a big bus station. It was small, but there were 2 bedrooms and a balcony. Overall, not a bad place because it was clean. When we moved in, there was basically nothing there, not even curtains or a shower curtain in the bathroom. On the first weekend back in the summer, Darcy and I went to Walmart to get some basic stuff that we were missing. We went to the bus station at the bottom of the building. As we were waiting, we noticed a man who seemed to be watching us. It wasn't that obvious, and definitely not something to make a big deal of. It's only notable in hindsight. He was around my height, 5'10", with a black hoodie pulled up all the way. His brown beard was protruding from the hood, and I could just barely see his nose. That was about all I could tell. We got on the bus, and so did that guy. When we got to our stop, we stopped paying attention to him and got off the bus. I didn't see if he followed. We had completely forgotten about him at that point, so we went into the store and did our shopping. Darcy and I split up. She went to the housewares section, and I went to get some food that we needed. I was in the aisle with the condiments when I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was that guy from the bus stop. He introduced himself as Troy, and went on to say that he was in my program at school. I was in the accounting program, but I didn't recognize him from any of my first-year classes. He also looked to be at least 25, a little old, but there were some mature students in the program. I didn't want to be rude, so I played along. I wasn't scared of him, more annoyed. I tried to excuse myself and find Darcy, but Troy kept lingering around me. I started walking, but he kept pace by my side. After a few minutes, he asked for my Instagram. My account was public at the time, so I gave it to him hoping he would leave me alone. It seemed to work, but as soon as I gave it to him, he disappeared into the vast store, and I didn't see him again that day. Darcy and I headed home soon after. I was somewhat active on Instagram at the time. I wasn't making money or anything, not taking sponsorships, but I did have a decent following. When we got home, Darcy and I set some things up. We were happy to finally have curtains. Then I went to my room to check my Instagram. When I looked, I noticed that Troy had commented on every single one of my posts. That's crazy, because I had over 1,000 at that point. It was creepy, and I began to regret giving it to him. Then the messages started. He was sending me at least 20 messages every day. They were mostly just hey and what's up, but when I didn't respond, they started to get scary. We started class the next week. I was expecting to see Troy. I was kind of dreading it actually, but I never saw him at school. I was starting to question whether he was really one of my classmates. Actually, I was pretty sure he wasn't. I got curious, so I checked Troy's profile. What I saw was truly disturbing. It was all pictures of my apartment building. Some of them were focusing on my window. I knew he was at that bus stop at the time, but I had no idea how he found out which apartment was ours. I definitely didn't post anything that would give that away. I blocked his account right away and reported him. I had a talk with Darcy, and we both agreed that we should report it to the police as well. She'd had a stalker before, so she knew the danger, even in the early stages. The police gave Troy a warning, and then they told me to stay off social media for a while. I went a step further. I deleted all of my public accounts and increased the privacy settings on my other ones. I never add people who I don't know anymore. It's not worth the risk. I'm a 40-year-old guy, but when this happened I was 22 years old. It was right around the time when Facebook burst onto the scene. I was on MySpace before then. Some of you won't even know what that is, but it was basically the same thing as Facebook. It pretty much disappeared though, as soon as people started using Facebook. It all began on a normal day. I was sat in front of my computer, scrolling through my feed. A friend request popped up, and my curiosity got the better of me. This was when it was all new. I was not as cautious as I would be now. The person's name was Maya, and her profile picture showed a pretty attractive woman. I know how stupid that sounds, so take it easy on me. With a click, I accepted her request. Shortly after, a message from Maya appeared in my inbox. "Hey Alex, how are you doing?" I replied, "Hi Maya, my day's been good so far. How's yours?" Our conversation flowed pretty easily. Maya seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself enjoying our chats. Days turned into weeks, and we kept talking almost every day. We sent some pictures back and forth. nothing too intimate, but she tried to talk me into sending some pretty revealing pictures. I was smart enough to decline. One day, however, Maya sent me a message that would make me question everything. She asked me for money. I had seen some documentaries about catfishing, and this was one of the biggest red flags. I wasn't that stupid, so I ignored her from then on. As time passed, Maya's messages flooded my inbox at all hours of the day. I unfriended and blocked her for that. Nothing happened for a few days, and then I got an email from an unknown person. This was back when you could see everyone's email on Facebook. To describe the email simply, it was a really desperate attempt at blackmail. I knew it was from Maya, or whoever she was pretending to be. That's because it had images that I had sent to her. The most embarrassing of which was just me in my bathroom, with no shirt. Cringy, I know, but not exactly devastating. The bottom of the email said that if I didn't pay some amount, I can't remember how much, then they would send the images to my entire contact list. I was creeped out, but just ignored it. I talked to my brother later in the week, and he did in fact get a random email with some pictures attached. I know it sounds like no big deal, but blackmail like this can be very serious. People have been ripped off for their life savings over scams like this. There have even been cases where people have lost their lives. It's no joke. I'm just glad my encounter with those creeps turned out the way it did. Not everyone is so lucky. The following story is true in its entirety. My name is Braden. I'm a 6'3" giant, and I weighed around 180 pounds during high school. I was pretty shy, and only stuck to a small group of friends. That was just a small piece of information that will make sense as we dive into the story. It was around 11:30 at night. I was tired, and about to fall asleep to screaming next door to my room. My sister was having a sleepover. My parents were asleep. As I was doing my nightly routine of falling asleep to Twitch, a barrage of girls barreled into my room. The girls immediately went to my window. The window is located on the side of the house, so that means that my window looks right into the neighbor's house. I can see my side gate leading to the backyard, so the girls at the window could see the gate to the neighbor's house. I felt something was off when the girls were giggling at the window for a total of 30 seconds to a minute. This next thing happened chilled me to the bone. I heard a knocking on the window, followed by this quote in a whisper. "Hey, let me in." When I heard this, I immediately got a sharp feeling in my chest, the feeling of fear and excitement. I got up from my bed, knowing I was going to face whatever was on the other side of the window. I pushed my way past the group of girls to find myself facing the window. I peeled back the curtains to find a short man. He looked up at me with great terror and somewhat in disbelief. When I was looking into his eyes, his pupils were huge. I'm telling y'all, this kid was high as a kite, but I remember seeing him around school. I wasn't too afraid when I saw him, and it didn't look like he had a weapon of any sort, but I noticed something. There were two men standing behind him in the background. They looked to be seniors that went to my school. I was a sophomore or a freshman at the time, so I knew they could easily overpower me, though I'm a big dude. The rest wasn't a big deal. I told them to get off my property, and they walked off. That's where the story gets interesting. After I told them to get off my property, I went back to my usual routine of watching Twitch. About 20 minutes later, I got a sudden urge to check and make sure they were gone for good. The first thing I noticed out of place was the gate. It was wide open. I was probably thinking of 1,000 different things at the time, but here was my thought process. My main thought was that they could easily have entered the backyard and entered the house already. That's because it had been 20 minutes, and a lot can happen in 20 minutes. My second thought was, what if they just opened the gate to scare me? My third thought was, what if they're peeking into the girls' room? I know that seems kind of random, but hear me out. My sister's room is located towards the back of the house, and if you look out the window, you can see the entire backyard from there. In that split second of looking at the gate, I immediately ran out of my room and down the hall to the kitchen. I checked the back door to make sure it was locked, and thank God it was. I then ran to my sister's room. The light was on, and the blinds were open. When you have the lights on in a house and it's pitch black outside, you can't see anything outside, but the people outside can see inside. Basically, it creates a mirror with a window. I told the girls in a quiet but concerned tone, "The gate is wide open." They all shifted their gaze towards the window, looking out to the backyard. I immediately turned off the light to reveal who was on the other side of the window. There they were, standing outside looking in. Right when I turned off the light, they scattered from the window into the darkness of the backyard. I left the room to check the back door again. Thankfully, nobody was there. I waited near the back door for what felt like hours, but it was probably only 5 minutes. I finally gathered the courage to go outside to the backyard and face these people. I told the girls I was going to check. One of them wanted to go with me. I was fine with it because I needed all the help I could get. We went outside to check the backyard, and surprisingly, we found nothing. I was thinking that maybe we should call the cops, but I didn't want anybody else, including my parents, to get involved in the situation. I closed the gate and went back inside. I went from very sleepy to not being able to sleep. The next morning, the girls told me everything that happened last night while hanging out in the pool. Apparently, he got our location from SnapMap. One of the girls mentioned that to me. One of the guys was visiting a friend's house across the street to smoke something. The kid got the bright idea to come over to our house and probably try to get it on with one of the girls. In the end, the kid was deeply sorry about the entire incident. He said he was high and not to tell anybody about it. I still haven't told my parents about this incident, and I don't plan on telling them anytime soon.